What if I told you ancient humans, people who hunted with stone tools, slept near predators, and had absolutely zero hospitals, still stopped everything to bury their dead? Not just hide the body, not just walk away. They dug graves. They placed objects beside the dead. They used red powder. And sometimes they decorated bodies with thousands of beads. These people had no writing, no cities, no books, no funeral homes, but somehow they already understood grief. And what they did with death might be one of the most human things ever discovered. Before cities, before farming, before kings, before money, before anyone wrote a single sentence, humans were already asking one terrifying question: what happens when someone is gone? For a long time, scientists assumed ancient humans were simple survival machines. Hunt, eat, sleep, run from giant cats, repeat. So when someone died, the old idea was, leave the body and keep moving. But archaeology tells a very different story. Across different parts of the world, researchers have found ancient graves where bodies were placed carefully. Not thrown, not dumped. Placed. And that tiny difference changes everything. Because the moment a human stops surviving long enough to bury someone, that is culture. That is memory. That is love. One of the most famous examples comes from Kafse Cave in Israel around 100,000 years ago. Archaeologists found early human remains buried with red ochre, a reddish pigment made from iron-rich rock. Now, red ochre was not food. You could not eat it. You could not hunt with it. It was not a survival tool. So why put it in a grave? That is the creepy, beautiful part. Maybe it symbolized blood. Maybe it symbolized life. Maybe it was a way to mark someone as important. We do not know for sure. But we do know this. Ancient humans looked at death and decided it needed color. Think about how strange that is. Imagine living in a world where every day is dangerous. You need food. You need fire. You need shelter. You need to avoid animals that see you as a walking snack. And yet, when someone dies, you spend time doing something symbolic. That means the dead were not just gone. They still mattered. At Tinchamet Cave, also in Israel, archaeologists found early humans carefully arranged in burial pits, with objects nearby: stones, animal remains, and fragments of ochre. These objects were not random trash. Some had no obvious practical use. That suggests they may have been part of a ritual. And that is huge. Because ritual means repetition. Meaning, a group decision. It means someone probably said, in whatever early communication they had, no, we do not leave them like that. Now let's talk about one of the most emotional burials ever found: Sungir in Russia. Around 34,000 years ago, two children were buried together, and their grave was packed with more than 10,000 mammoth ivory beads, plus spears, ornaments, and other objects. More than 10,000 beads. Each bead had to be made by hand. No machines, no factories, no online shopping. Just stone tools, bone tools, patience, and probably a lot of ancient complaining. This was not a quick goodbye. This was effort. This was time. This was a community saying, these children mattered so much that we are going to spend an insane amount of labor sending them away with beauty. And that hits hard. Because in a brutal world where every hour could be spent finding food, they chose to spend thousands of hours on the dead. The harsher life was, the more powerful grief became. Now here's where things get even more mysterious. Ancient people often buried the dead with objects: tools, weapons, ornaments, shells, animal bones, pigments. Why? Maybe they believed the dead needed those things somewhere else. That does not prove they believed in heaven or an afterlife exactly like modern religions do. But it does suggest something important. They were not treating the dead like empty bodies. They were treating them like people who still had meaning. Maybe the objects were gifts. Maybe they showed status. Maybe they represented identity. Maybe they helped the living remember who that person had been. But whatever the reason, the message is clear. Death did not erase someone. And it was not only Homo sapiens. Neanderthals also seem to have cared deeply for their dead. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, Neanderthal remains became famous because pollen was found near one skeleton. For decades, people imagined Neanderthals placing flowers on graves. Now, modern researchers debate this. Some think the pollen might have come from bees, not flowers placed by Neanderthals. So, we have to be honest. The flower burial story is not certain. But even without the flowers, Shanidar is still powerful. The bodies appear to have been treated with care, and one Neanderthal from the same cave had survived serious injuries, which suggests other Neanderthals helped him live. That means these ancient relatives were not just wild cave monsters. They had social bonds, they had care, they had loss, and that makes the whole story bigger than us, because grief may not belong only to modern humans. It may go deeper, older, darker, more ancient than we want to admit. Now let's return to red ochre because this stuff appears again and again. Across ancient burials, humans used red pigment in ways that seem symbolic. They placed it near bodies. They stained bones. They covered graves. Why red? Red is blood. Red is fire. Red is sunset. Red is danger. Red is life leaving the body. Even today, red feels powerful. So imagine an ancient human holding red powder, looking at someone they loved, and trying to say something without words. Something like, "You are not just dirt, you were alive. You were one of us." That is what makes these burials so emotional. Ancient humans could not explain death with science. They could not call a doctor. They could not write poems. They could not post a memory online. They had almost nothing. So they used what they had: a pit, a stone, a bead, a flower maybe, a handful of red earth, and silence. Here's the real twist. We often imagine ancient humans as primitive because they did not have our technology. But maybe technology is the wrong measure. Because when someone died, they did not just move on, they stopped. They gathered, they made something, they remembered. That is not primitive, that is painfully human. So how did ancient humans deal with death? They did what we still do. They created rituals to survive the unbearable. They turned a body into a memory. They turned grief into action. They turned death into meaning. And maybe that is why funerals exist at all. Not for the dead, for the living. Because the living are the ones left holding the silence. So the next time you see a funeral, a grave, a candle, flowers, or someone wearing black, remember this. You are not seeing something modern. You are seeing something ancient. Something that began long before writing. Long before cities. Maybe even before us. Death did not make ancient humans give up on each other. It made them hold on tighter. Drop a comment. Does it comfort you or freak you out that humans have been grieving like this for tens of thousands of years? And if this video made you think, watch the next one. Why did ancient humans paint caves? Because the answer is even stranger than you expect.